Good morning. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord, our Savior. There is no shadow of turning with thee. All we need and all we wanted and all we asked for, we thank you, Heavenly Father, that you have supplied. Can we bow our heads? Heavenly Father, we give you thanks and praise and glory. We thank you because your words say that we must call upon you, that you would hear us, you would answer us, and show us great and mighty things. We pray that even as this honorable house, Lord, is assembled together, Lord, today, we pray that for your wisdom, your grace, and your mercy. Father, we invite your divine presence, Lord, to intervene in this meeting today, that, Lord, the matters that are brought forth and be discussed, Heavenly Father, at the end of the discussion, they will be fruitful. We pray that you would bless the speaker, Lord, as she directs the House. We pray for the members of government and those that are in opposition. We pray, Father, for wisdom above all things to prevail. We commit the atmosphere, Lord, within your hands, and we pray that all things will be done unto your honor and unto your glory, to Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Can we say our Father's prayer? Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Good morning, members. You may be seated.
Confirmation of minutes. Minutes of proceedings of the 13th meeting of third session of 12th Anguilla House of Assembly.
Are there any amendments to the minutes? If there are no amendments, can someone move that the minutes be accepted as circulated, please?
Madam Speaker, I move that the minutes are accepted as circulated.
Thank you, members. It has been moved and seconded that the minutes of proceedings of the 13th meeting of the third session of the 12th Anguilla House of Assembly be accepted as circulated. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Minutes accepted as circulated.
Oath of allegiance to new members. Honorable Deputy Governor Acting.
I, Karim V.D. Hodge, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty, King Charles III, his heirs and successors according to law. So help me God. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'll do it after.
Announcements by the direction of the Speaker.
I make apologies for the absence with reason for the member for Island Harbor. And for the Attorney General, who's going to be late this morning. Also, you know, I hate to start my day like this with things that I feel that are not progressive to the people of Anguilla, but for the record, I would like to clarify the grounds upon which the questions by the Honorable Single Island Wide Electoral District member, Mr. Kyle Hodge, were ruled out of order and not allowed. My initial assessment would have been that the questions refer to a matter before the courts or are sub judice, as per Rule 56(5)(a). 5, a member while speaking on a question must not refer to any matter on which a judicial decision is pending in such a way as may prejudice the interests of the parties hereto. I have since confirmed that as of today this rule does not apply. But further to this, note as well that the questions are out of order as per Rule 58 and Rule 23(7) of the House of Assembly Procedure Rules. The rules state, reflections upon the Crown or upon certain persons in authority, and 58, the conduct of Her Majesty members of the royal family, the Governor, Speaker, or members of the Assembly, and judges and other persons engaged in the administration of justice shall not be raised except upon a substantive motion. And in any amendment, question to a member or remarks in a debate on a motion dealing with any other subject in any reference to the conduct of those persons shall be out of order. 23(7), a question reflecting on the character or conduct of any person whose conduct can only be challenged on a substantive motion may not be asked. If a member would like to raise that matter, then based on the rules, it would have to be by a substantive motion that elicits a specific response from the Assembly. Therefore, during the course of today's proceedings, I will not be entertaining any discussion on reflections on the matter and will reiterate Rule 58. Thank you, members.
Madam Speaker, if I may, can I rise to interject for a brief moment? Because, you know, rules, Madam Speaker, they have different interpretations. So if I can get a minute or two to...
Sorry? Yeah. Well, you have your interpretation, member. You have your interpretation, I have mine, and this is how I interpret it. So as of now, if you wish to bring the, that substantive motion, you are welcome to do so. And that's going to be it on that discussion for today.
Madam Speaker,
anything
when it comes to the sub judice
member,
rule, it speaks to matters before
I
the
understand.
court.
I just explained.
And this matter,
member,
Speaker,
please, I am speaking to you. Please
but
have your
when
seat.
would I be able to speak?
Please have your seat. I
You
have
said-
already. Member, I have already made a ruling on this.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
but I wanna
This
at
is not
least
for discussion.
address
This is not a
what was-
debate. You are not allowed to address what I say to this. This is the rule. Thank you. We will continue.
If I can ask a question that I got.
Members, you may continue. Clerk?
Questions? None. Government statements on recent developments? None. Papers? None. Reports from committees? None. Petitions? None. Government notices? None. Private members' notices, none. Motions. Motions 6, 2023-312 HOA, Customs Duty and Tax Exemption Motion Regulations 2023.
Just want to interject for the record. The opposition have left the assembly without the consent of the speaker. Please let the record show. And please, the public should make note of that as well. You may continue for the motion. Motion 6, 2023. The Honorable Member acting as Minister of Finance and member for Road South is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move the following motion, Motion 06, 2023, Customs and Duty and Tax Exemption. Be it resolved, the resolution made by the House of Assembly under Section 77(1) of the Customs Act, RSA, small c, large c 169, Section 2 of the Interim Goods and Tax Amendment Act 2020 and Section 3 of the Excise Tax Amendment Act 2020 was proposed and seconded on the House of Assembly on the 13th day of June 2023. Whereas a certificate of good standing that had not expired had been cancelled but produced to the Minister of Finance in relation to the importers. Be it resolved that under the powers contained in Section 77(1) of the Customs Act, RSA small c 169, Section 2 of the Interim Goods Tax Amendment Act 2020, and Section 3 of the Excise Amendment Act 2020, the House of Assembly as exempts from customs duty, interim goods and tax, and excise tax, the goods imported into Anguilla specified in the schedule. The following conditions apply in respect to all goods exempted by virtue of this resolution. A, the goods shall not, within 5 years of the date of importation, be sold, exchanged, given away, or applied to any use other than the use specified in the schedule. B, on the expiry of 6 months from the date of the importation and each successive 6-month period, within the 5-year period under the date of importation, the importer shall certify to the Comptroller of Customs in a form acceptable to the Comptroller of Customs that he has complied with the conditions set out in paragraph A. C, upon demand made by the Customs Officer, the goods exempted under this resolution shall be produced or otherwise accounted for to the Customs Officer. D, in accordance with the Customs Administrative Cost Recovery Act, RSA small c 170, at the time of import, the importer shall pay the custom administration charge at a rate specified in the schedule. 2, in accordance with Section 71 of the Customs Act, RSA small c 169, the following apply in the event that a condition referred to in Section 1 of this resolution is contravened or not complied with. A, if any of the goods exempted under this resolution are sold, exchanged, given away, or applied to any use other than the use specified in the schedule within 5 years of the date of importation, 1, the importer shall pay the customs duty and interim goods tax and excise tax on the value of such goods at a rate specified in the integrated custom tariff at the date of importation. 2, the importer and any person knowingly concerned in such sale, exchange, gift, or unsanctioned use is guilty of an offense and may be arrested and is liable for a fine of $20,000 or 3 times the customs duty, excise tax, and interim good tax relieved, whichever is the greater, or to imprisonment of a term of 2 years or to both. And 3, the goods in respect of which the exemption was granted are liable to forfeiture. B, the importer fails to certify that he has not sold, exchanged, given away, or applied the goods to any other use other than use specified in the schedule. 1, the importer shall produce or account for the goods exempted under this resolution to the Comptroller of Customs. 2, any goods not produced or accounted for will be deemed to have been sold, exchanged, given away, or applied to some use other than the use specified in the schedule and paragraph A. 1, applied, and 2, if any goods not produced or accounted for are subsequently found, they will be liable to forfeiture. C, if the importer fails to produce or account for the goods exempted under this resolution upon demand by a custom officer, 1, the importer and any other person knowingly concerned with failure in such failure are guilty of an offense and may be arrested and are liable to a fine of $20,000 or 3 times the value of the goods, whichever is greater, or to imprisonment of a term of 2 years or to both. And 2, if any goods not produced or accounted for are subsequently found, they are liable to forfeiture. D, if the importer fails to pay the customs administration fee at a rate specified in the schedule at the expiry of 30 days from the date of delivery of a demand of payment made by the Comptroller of Customs or such longer period as may be designed by the Comptroller of Customs, 1, the importer shall pay the customs duty, excise tax, and interim goods tax on the value of such goods at the rate specified in the integrated customs tariff at the date of importation. 2, the importer and any person knowingly concerned in such failure are guilty of an offense and may be arrested and are liable to a fine of $20,000 or 3 times the value of the goods, whichever is greater, or to imprisonment of a term of 2 years or both. And 3, the goods exempted under this resolution are liable to forfeiture. Madam Speaker, move.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
Do you want to give a brief explanation, member, as to the motion?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to give a brief explanation of this motion. Madam Speaker, Mr. Joshua Gomes, one of Anguilla's patriots and someone who have given of himself, he has an organization called Only the Serious, Madam Speaker, where he teaches drum classes, not only drum classes, but life skills. And so he has asked for duty-free concessions to import a small number of items, including a dry erase board, ceiling fan, folding table, printers, folding chairs, Madam Speaker. And this is what we are laying before the House today. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Motion 6/2023-312 HOA has been moved and seconded. The floor is now open for contributions to this motion. The Single Island Wide Electoral District Member, Mr. Kenneth Hodge, is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues on this side of the House. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for the opposite side of the House, but nonetheless, we go on. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this motion. Madam Speaker, I'm a firm advocate of music. I've been a music teacher and a musician for most of my life, Madam Speaker, and I fully appreciate the skills and the discipline that music teaches. And so this morning, Madam Speaker, I want to commend Mr. Gomes for the work that he is doing in promoting music, especially the drums. That's something that I've never learned to play, Madam Speaker. When we're having so many issues in our community, with so much issues with our young people, lack of direction, lack of focus, Madam Speaker, and we have persons like Mr. Gomes, who is teaching the art of music to drums and other forms, Madam Speaker, it can give our young people a new focus, a new direction, Madam Speaker. And I dare say that Anguilla is renowned, Madam Speaker, for its caliber of musicians that are produced. Our drummers, our guitarists, our vocalists, our bands, Madam Speaker. And so I support this motion in that it will help to further enhance the teaching and learning experience for the students taught by Mr. Gomes. I want to encourage, Madam Speaker, more of our young people to avail themselves of this opportunity to learn a skill. Music, Madam Speaker, when we look at what's happening with people like Rihanna, and others from the Caribbean, and even in Anguilla, Madam Speaker. You know, it kind of bothers me when I look at the raw talent that I see at our Singspirations and our concerts, you know, and I shake my head, I say, these could be Rihanna's here in Anguilla just because of the lack of exposure. And Madam Speaker, we know of Diana, we know of young Banky, we know of so many others, Madam Speaker, that continue to make Anguilla proud. And I want to say here this morning, Madam Speaker, I want to encourage more of our young people to learn a skill, learn the skill, the gift of music. It will take you far in life. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Single Island Wide Electoral District Member, Mrs. Quincy Gums-Marie, is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll be brief, but following the words of my colleague, the Single Island Wide Member, Ken Hodge, I again support this motion. Many persons ask why we bring this motion to the House, and that's what I want to briefly speak about. And it is always something that I'm honored to do when we have the opportunity to speak about tax exemptions for specific purposes. This motion is moved by the Honorable, well, Acting Premier, but ordinarily the Premier Minister of Finance, who brings this motion because when we speak about budget, and we would have done so at the end of last year, we set out a portfolio and a projection on how much money we intend to receive on tax. And so when we return to the House on exemptions, we are saying that this matter is so important to us for whatever reason, that we would like to forego tax to give the important opportunity to utilize the investment that they have made for good and not tax them for reinvesting in our society. And every time one of these are brought to this stage, it is after a considerable amount of review, letters between the importer and the Ministry of Finance, understanding what the full implication and the intention of the imported good is, and then understanding what the value, the social value of the imported good is. And so I'm very honored to support this, this motion, not only because of the social value, but it's because of a young man who's investing in society and who's investing his talents in society. Joshua Gums is an incredible musician. You would probably have seen him, I think you would have attended the concert at the Seventh-day Adventist Church with the pianist Emily Bayer, and I think he was there as well. And you would see him at different functions representing Anguilla, but also reinvesting in Anguilla. And so to do that on a more official scale with his organization, it is endorsed by government, it is supported by government, and I wish him the very best. And I'm hopeful for the students who will be under his tutelage. I think he's a great person and they will learn a lot. And I definitely welcome this motion to forgo tax for this purpose. I think it is a worthy investment.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Are there any other contributions? If there are no other contributions, I invite the mover to respond, please.
Thank you very much, colleagues, and thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Undoubtedly, Mr. Gums continues to do a great work for not only for his community, but the community of Anguilla on a whole. And I'm happy that we are here to partake and participate in his continued growth and development. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Motion 6, 2023, 312 HOA has been moved and seconded. The question now is that this motion be passed. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Motion 6, 2023, 312 HOA has been passed without amendment and is now a resolution of the Assembly.
Personal explanations, none. Other business, government business. A bill for Bribery Act 2023, second reading.
The Honorable Attorney General is recognized.
Good morning, Madam Speaker and colleague members of the House of Assembly. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill shortly entitled "A Bill for Bribery Act 2023" be read a second time.
Madam Speaker, I rise a second.
Thank you, members. May I continue?
Madam Speaker, honorable members, not so long ago, I think on the last sitting of this House, or certainly the one before that, a suite of bills came to this honorable House in relation to our assessment for compliance with CFATF regulations and recommendations. This bill is one such bill as part of the portmanteau, the portfolio, the continuing suite of legislation that must be passed in Anguilla to make Anguilla ready, compliant, and effective in transparency, accountability, and the fight against corruption and corrupt practices. Madam Speaker, honorable members, the objects and reasons for this bill may be stated in the following manner. Clause 2 of the bill describes the offense of bribery as it applies to the person doing the bribing. Case 1 deals with circumstances in which the offer, promise, or giving is made either directly or through a third party with the intention that it induces a person to perform improperly a relevant function or activity, or that it rewards a person for such a performance. That's case 1, description of bribery. Case 2 deals with circumstances in which the offer, promise, or gift of an advantage is made to a person in the knowledge or belief that the acceptance of the advantage would constitute improper performance of a relevant function or activity. Clause 3. Clause 3 describes the offense of bribery as it relates to the person who is receiving. And in the bill, you'll notice the alphabetical reference to the receiver of a bribe as the designation R. So it relates to the person who is receiving or potentially receiving a bribe. There are 4 cases describing the relevant behavior. Clause 4 defines the relevant functions or activities to which an improper performance relates. It ensures that the law of bribery applies to public and private functions without discriminating between the two. So it creates an objective standard in relation to bribery where it occurs. It encompasses activities performed outside Anguilla and activities with no link to Anguilla as well. Bribery general offenses cover any function of a public nature, any activity connected with a business, including trade or profession, any activity performed in the course of a person's employment, or any activity performed by or on behalf of a body of persons, either corporate or unincorporated. Clause 5 defines what will amount to an improper performance on the functions or activities explained in Section 4, just mentioned. The section covers improper performance of current functions, but also covers past functions, so that a bribe or a current receiving may be in relation to a past performance of a function, official or otherwise, in relation to which the current receipt is the payment or the reward. The definition of an improper performance embraces both breaches of the relevant expectation through both acts and omissions. Clause 6 provides that the expectation that a reasonable person in Angola would expect of a person performing such a function or activity, when an allegation is one of bribery overseas, in so deciding what a reasonable person in Angola would expect by way of performance, a court must disregard any local custom or practice unless it is permitted by written law, a statute or code, either statutory or judge-made judgment of a court. By clause 7 of this bill, the offense under this clause is an active bribery only offense and does not criminalize the passive conduct on the part of an official, governmental or state. But it is broad in scope, so that an offense is committed if a person, directly or indirectly, promises or offers or gives any financial or other advantage to a foreign public official with intention of influencing the performance of their official function. The offense is provided with a wide definition of a foreign public official, which embraces any person who hold or should hold any legislative, administrative, or judicial post, or anyone carrying out a public function, whether appointed or elected. The offense catches omissions as well as acts and covers advantages that are intended to influence the use of an official position, even when or even where that is not formally within the authority of a person holding the post. Clause 8 creates an offense of failing to prevent bribery, and this is significant. Now, this offense of failing to prevent bribery, which can only be committed by a relevant commercial organization. The section also provides that the definition of business includes a trade or profession, including what is done during the course of a trade or profession. An offense is committed under this section if a person associated with the relevant organization bribes another person in order to retain or obtain business or advantage. It is not necessary for the person associated with the commercial organization to be prosecuted. If the predicate facts are proved, then the commercial organization in question is prima facie, or on the surface, certainly, guilty of an offense, irrespective of the extent of knowledge, awareness, or intent in respect of the facts at the corporate center. The section therefore creates a form of strict liability in relation to incorporated bodies, companies and corporations, on the basis of objective facts. Strict liability operates where certain facts which amount to an offense as described in a statute are found to exist, then without much probity or scrutiny beyond those facts having occurred, an offense is committed. And therefore, criminal liability is superficially established. Clause 9 sets out the meaning of associated person, in inverted commas, associated person, for the purpose of section 8 just referred to. A person is associated with a commercial organization if he or she performs services for it regardless of the capacity in which they perform those services. That is to say, as an employee, agent, or subsidiary. The performance of services for a company cannot include the service of being involved in the bribe in question itself, because the bribe is the offense, it's not the service. The role of an associated person may also be fulfilled by another company, such as a subsidiary of the commercial organization in question. The associated person could be a person holding a high managerial role in the commercial organization under review. Clause 10 provides that the governor must publish guidance about the procedures that relevant organizations can put in place to prevent associated persons committing bribery or bribery offenses on their behalf for the purposes of Section 8, earlier detailed. Clause 11 makes it a duty for a public official who is offered or receives an advantage under circumstances which may objectively constitute an offense under the Act to make a disclosure as soon as reasonably practicable. So this is an opportunity for the deployment of common sense in the practice of public affairs. The disclosure should be made to a police officer in situations where the employer has a procedure to making such disclosures in accordance with the procedure, and to a police officer. A public official is a public officer, member of the House of Assembly, and any other person carrying out a function of a public nature, but does not include a foreign public official, for reasons indicated earlier in the preceding clauses that create separate offenses in relation to bribery of foreign public officials. Clause 12 makes it an offense if a person fails to comply with Section 11. That is, of course, the reporting, where objectively you have received something under circumstances which create a suspicion that you are being sweetened, as they say. It is a defense for the person to prove he had reasonable belief that if the disclosure was made, serious harm would be done to him or someone else. Clause 13 makes it an offense for a person who intentionally takes harmful action, which includes interference with the person's lawful employment, on the grounds that the person made a lawful disclosure pursuant to Section 11. So in other words, a person who is a whistleblower, a person who feels uncomfortable by conduct which objectively may engage this act as an offense and makes a report, you cannot be victimized. Attempted victimization is prohibited under this proposed legislation for what would otherwise be doing the right thing. Clause 14 provides that proceedings for bribery offenses under this Act require the consent of the Attorney General. Summary offenses under this Act shall be brought within 3 years of the commission of the offense. Now, this clause is important for the following reasons. Consistent with the Constitution, the Attorney General is non-partisan and non-political and responsible for prosecution in the country. So that where there may be a situation of an alleged bribery offense, consistent with the Constitution and the expectations of the Constitution, prosecution is a matter within the hands lawfully, constitutionally, of the Attorney General. Additionally, for the protection of persons and their rights from witch hunts and stale allegations, police and law enforcement authorities must get their act together if there is a real case and prosecute that case within 3 years of the allegation of the bribery offense or circumstances giving rise to it, so that you can't harass a person 5 or 6 years later on mere allegation or stale accusations. So the importance of that clause is that it is consistent with fundamental constitutional protections afforded by the Supreme Law. Clause 15 sets out the penalties for breaching the provisions of the Act. Clause 16 allows the court to make a forfeiture order under this section If a person is convicted of a bribery offense, the court may order the forfeiture of any property at the time of the offense the person had in his possession or under his control, and the property was used or intended to be used for the purposes of the offense or the bribery offense. So, by way of example, if it is established that you received a SUV or you purchased a SUV from proceeds of a bribe in relation to the performance of your official function, in relation to which the people entrusted the public trust to you, if convicted, the court is empowered to grant a forfeiture order, which means that that property, that SUV in the example that I just gave, would be taken, would be seized and disposed of, taken from you. You would be disgorged of the proceeds of corrupt practices. The court may order forfeiture in whole or in part of property received directly or indirectly from a person as payment or reward in connection with the commission of the offense. A person, other than the person convicted, who claims to be the owner or who has an interest in anything forfeited, the court shall give an opportunity to be heard before making the order. So that is also consistent with fundamental justice and the Constitution. There's nothing unusual about this procedure just described. Clause 17 provides the jurisdictional provision of the Act, where the conduct that would constitute an offense, if it occurred in Anguilla, in fact occurs outside of Anguilla. The courts in Anguilla will have jurisdiction where the conduct is on the part of a person with close connection to Anguilla. Clause 18 provides a statutory defense for statutory defense or security when engaging in legitimate functions that may require the use of financial or other advantage, if it can be proved that a relevant bribery offense was necessary. Clause 19 concerns the circumstances in which a company is convicted of a bribery offense. It does not concern circumstances in which a commercial organization is convicted under Section 8 of this Act for that offense. Clause 20 clarifies the position on proceedings against partnerships under Section 8 offenses, how those proceedings should be brought, and how any fines imposed on the partnership should be paid. Clause 21 importantly establishes a National Anti-Corruption and Bribery Committee whose responsibilities include advising the governor on the development of policies for the detection and prevention of corruption and bribery, reviewing the operation of the Act, and reporting to the governor and periodically evaluating existing legislation or existing legislative and administrative measures. Under the arrangement proposed by this provision and this enactment, the Commissioner of Police is the chairman of the committee. Governor is responsible for laying a copy of the report submitted by the chair to the House of Assembly. I suppose, as a matter of parliamentary practice, the transmittal of that report would ordinarily come to the House through the person of whoever is Attorney General. Clause 22 makes application and transitional, makes provision for application and transitional provisions. Clause 23 provides for consequential amendments in relation to other enactments affected. Clause 24 provides for the commencement of this Act, and Clause 25 provides for the citation of this enactment proposed. Those, Madam Speaker, honorable members, are essentially the objects and reasons for the measures contained in this bill. And as I indicated earlier, this bill is part of the suite of legislation that are being passed in compliance with CFATF recommendations and regulations in relation to transparency, accountability, and good governance in public affairs. And with those remarks, Madam Speaker, I commend the bill and consideration of its content to the whole House.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now invite contributions on a bill for Bribery Act 2023. Floor is open. The member for Valley South is recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this piece of legislation. I believe it's been a long time coming. We've heard a number of calls from persons in the public to ensure that we approach bribery with a strong hand in the interest of the public. And I believe, although it comes under the context of the FATF recommendations, which are put in place to ensure that our systems in relation to anti-money laundering and terrorist financing are above the fray, I think it comes at a good time to ensure that the public is seeing the government doing as they must in order to protect the public interest. And what I want to bring to your attention, Madam Speaker, is, and it's simply to paint a story, because I remember that the member for Valley North brought up in the public consultation some of her issues in relation to the Bribery Act. In fact, the leader of opposition had called for this act not to go forward to passage a couple weeks ago. It was pulled from the agenda of the House of Assembly. Yeah. And I think it was a little bit concerning for government, because we are very cognizant of the need to ensure that legislation specifically related to bribery goes through and is put into effect. But it reminded me, and this is probably one of the sittings of the House that I actually listened to on the radio, on the 26th of January, 2016, when the then member for Island Harbor, Ms. Pamela Van Webster, asked questions to the then leader of government business, the Honorable Chief Minister, Mr. Victor Banks, in relation to the Bribery Act specifically. And just to point it out further, they asked, the member for Island Harbor at the time asked these questions. She asked whether or not Anguilla will seek to bring into its legislation in line with the UK Bribery Act of 2010 during their elected term in office. To which the then Chief Minister responded, the member for Island Harbor seems to imply that a similar situation exists in Anguilla that would require urgent enactment of such legislation. He then continued, the government of Anguilla has in excess of 4 years to its end and will be prepared to add this to its legislative agenda for prioritization. Subsequently, he was asked whether or not it is the policy of the government to follow the standards set out in the UK Bribery Act, and the then Chief Minister responded, yes, as far as those standards are applicable to the different circumstances of our colonial status. He was then asked whether the policy is to be rigorously applied to his ministry and government and civil servants, and he responded, his government practices the highest level of integrity in office, and it is unfair to ask him questions about all civil servants. Those were the responses in relation to the recommendation that this Bribery Act be brought to the House of Assembly for debate and for passage in 2016. That's 6 years after the 2010 Act, and now we are here 7 years after the first request for the bribery legislation to be placed before this honorable House. And needless to say, Madam Speaker, it is a priority for this administration to ensure that bribery and corruption is stamped out of the halls of Parliament and elsewhere, because one of the concerns raised in the public consultations, if you were listening, Madam Speaker, is that parts of the bribery legislation, the Bribery Act, apply to individuals or to corporations. And I wanted to give you an example because I don't think that there's anywhere else in the world where the Bribery Act would not apply to individuals and corporations as well as public officers and elected officials, because it takes two hands to shake. If there is a bribe being offered from a corporation or business to an elected official or public officer, it is consequently illegal for the person, on the other hand, to offer that bribe. And just to give you a few examples, the United States of America, through the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, it applies to both public officers, public officials, individuals, and corporations. The United Kingdom has a Bribery Act of 2010 that extends bribery to individuals and corporations. Canada has the Corruption of Foreign Public Officials Act, which applies both to individuals and corporations. Australia, through its criminal code, applies both to individuals and corporations. Germany, France, through its penal code. Japan, through its Unfair Competition Prevention Act. Brazil, through its anti-corruption law. India, through the Prevention of Corruption Act. South Africa, through the Prevention and Combating of Corruption Act. Mexico, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Singapore through their Prevention of Corruptions Act. But to bring it closer to home, we have Bahamas through its Prevention of Bribery Act, which covers offenses related to both the individual and the corporation. Barbados, Prevention of Corruption Act. Jamaica, the Corruption Prevention Act. Trinidad and Tobago, the Dominican Republic, Guyana, St. Lucia, Suriname, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada, and Belize, through their Prevention of Corruption Acts. These provisions relating to bribery extend to both individuals and corporations. And that is specifically to address the issue raised by the member for Valley North when concerned about these provisions being extended to individuals and corporations. There's a reason for it, Madam Speaker. The framework is such that you are trying to prevent bribery from taking place at all. And therefore, it is not just incumbent on coming down and ensuring that the public official or the civil servant does not accept a bribe, which is accepted within the legislation as an offense, but also to ensure that individuals are not induced or corporations are not induced to offer a bribe to a public official or a civil servant. And in so doing, trying to net out any possibility of offering a bribe, because it is now illegal. And just to give you some very discrete examples, because I think sometimes when we have the legislation, some laypersons may not understand exactly what we mean by what is considered as a bribe or as taking a bribe. And some of the circumstances, just to break it down in terms of an analogy, Madam Speaker, is to say it is like someone offering a bribe to a referee to fix a match. So the legislation is put in place things to ensure that no decisions are being made based on someone offering you, a public officer or a civil servant, a bribe to ensure that a specific outcome takes place. Or, and I mean, there are a number of examples. If you're looking at, you're asking a student to ask a teacher to change their grades, if you can buy something for the teacher, all of those are captured. Those scenarios, but specifically within the context of public elected officials, public officers, individuals, and corporations. And so, Madam Speaker, that is part of the reason why I stand in support of this piece of legislation. I think that it is a long time coming, and it is very necessary to move Anguilla, both in terms of our the CFAT recommendations, and to ensure that Anguilla is ready and prepared to avoid any negative economical and financial implications of being blacklisted for not upholding the standards of transparency and accountability within our nation, but also to ensure that there is confidence that if public officials are attempting to take bribes, there is now legislation that directly deals with those instances. So this piece of legislation has my full support, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I wish you had brought an example that pertains specifically to members of the Parliament. I recognize the member for Road South.
With that said, Madam Speaker, I rise. It is no secret, Madam Speaker, that regardless of the propaganda they spread out there, I am the biological, legal, and lawful son of Hubert Benjamin Hughes. And as such, I grew up in his house, and I knew how he felt about bribery. And I believe he would have been very happy today to see this piece of legislation being tabled in this honorable House, Madam Speaker. It is long, long overdue. I can recall vividly, as a young boy, one time he came home very upset. He was campaigning, and while he was campaigning, he was reminded of someone was demanding money for votes. And he was a man that didn't have any corners with his mouth, Madam Speaker. If he was in politics today, with social media and cell phones and video recordings and the like, I doubt he would last one day in politics, Madam Speaker, because some of the things that he would say would shake us heavily, Madam Speaker. So much so that in 1985, after making it clear that a member of the House was doing something that was illegal, while he was in this Parliament, Madam Speaker, that member of the House physically assaulted him and boxed him down, knocked him out, Madam Speaker, in the House, and was captured in an article by the one Mr. Calvin Petty, OBE, when he had made his announcement that he will be retiring from politics. And Mr. Petty had jokingly said, only through the grave he will retire from politics. And he made that as one of the references in which he was sick, Madam Speaker, in a humorous way. But that is a matter of historical fact. We know what my father would say, Madam Speaker. So I know he would be very pleased with this. And I remember he was giving a story, because what a lot of people don't know is that Hubert Benjamin Hughes was also a supporter of the St. Kitts Labour Party. As a matter of fact, he was the last person to run with Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw in 1961 as a member of his party when he was 28 years old. And he spoke of a story when he was campaigning, because it was a single island white constituency, Madam Speaker. And he got to a particular district that I won't mention today. And I'm sure you've heard the story. And an older man came up to him and said, Mr. Hughes, give me $100 and I'll get you 100 votes. That in itself says what it is. Give me $100 and I'll get you 100 votes, Madam Speaker. And the member for Valley South spoke of bribery, and bribery comes in many forms. I often recall and recounted a situation, me myself, where in 2015, just weeks before the general election, an Asian Anguillian, I may say, approached me in my capacity as a parliamentary secretary to do them a favor with a brown paper bag of cash. And when they first came the first time, I asked my secretary to escort her out of the office. But she had the audacity to show up at my gate, Madam Speaker, at my home. And I said to her, this is a bribe, I'm going to report you. But guess what, Madam Speaker? Reporting made no sense. The report was made, and I was told that there's no legislation to address it, Madam Speaker. So not only are members of Parliament, are people in these sort of positions are approached to be bribed. In some instances, they are bribed. But they also give bribes, Madam Speaker. Because when you go out to run for elected office and somebody says to you, or you say to them, I'm going to give you this in exchange of a vote, that is a bribe, Madam Speaker. And so this also helps, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, I put it to the House today that the members of the opposition did not walk out over lack of questions being tabled before the House. The members of the opposition walked out because of this Anti-Bribery Act, Madam Speaker. Because that Anguilla United Front has a history of bribing and accepting bribes, Madam Speaker. Every single last one of them, Madam Speaker. It was one, Ms. Cora Richardson Hodge, Madam Speaker, in 2009, when Andy Arsenal of the Financial Investigative Unit raided her office, confiscated her computers, Madam Speaker. And I'm not going to go too much into that, Madam Speaker. And she, too, was opposed to this Bribery Act coming to the House, Madam Speaker, because they're afraid. They're afraid that this type of legislation would capture them. And if you look through the history of that unscrupulous organization led by the member for Sandy Hill, Cora Richardson Hodge, a history of bribery, taking bribes, offering bribes, whether it's immigration officers in St. Martin or wherever, and no consequences, Madam Speaker. None. All sorts of things they have been accused of, Madam Speaker. One of the founding members of the Anguilla United Front was in partnership with a man by the name of Sanders, Madam Speaker, and the FBI swooped in Anguilla and dragged him out of the office and took him back to the United States and prosecuted him, and he went to jail. But nothing happened to that founding member. One of the founding members of the Anguilla United Front, Madam Speaker, who also served in this parliament with Cora Richardson Hodge, is a director of a company called Fidelity Insurance, where all of the principals are sitting in federal prison in the United States of America today, Madam Speaker. And if you go to the company registrations office today, you will still see the name there, Madam Speaker. And we can speak of many instances of that administration. The administration that the single Ireland member, Mr. Kyle Hodge, is wrapped up in bed with, taking orders. They're making him jump all around like a bunny rabbit today, Madam Speaker. Because, Madam Speaker, those questions that he posed out there, Madam Speaker, has no relevance. I'd love to answer them today.
Stick
But,
to
Madam
the
Speaker,
act.
let's
We're
stay
debating the Bribery
within
Act. Yes.
the Bribery Act, because it's important that we understand how long overdue this act is. How long overdue this act is, Honorable Attorney General. This act should have come to this House even before we had a governor, even before the governor was called a commissioner. This act should have been brought to the House under Attorney General Kurt de Freitas, under Attorney General Alan Hood, under Attorney General Boone. Not your Boone, Madam Speaker, but another Boone who was the Attorney General, Madam Speaker. This act should have come to this honorable House a long time ago, Madam Speaker, because it was one Mr. Kenneth Rijak in his book, Confessions of a Money Launderer, spoke of the type of things that occurred in this country, Madam Speaker, under the same Anguilla United Front administration, Madam Speaker, that was once called the Anguilla National Alliance. He spoke of bringing millions of dollars into this country, Madam Speaker, meeting with the chief minister at the time, setting up accounts such as Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, and the like. It's in the book, Madam Speaker, and there's a follow-up book, The Laundryman. You can go on Amazon and you can read it. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, the journalists, perhaps one of the few rare journalists in Anguilla, Mr. Keatson Graves, had the opportunity just a few years ago, Madam Speaker, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, to interview Mr. Kenneth Rijak on his program before the Anguilla United Front shut it down because they thought it did not show them in a good light, Madam Speaker. But he came back. Talk Anguilla rebranded. And we are not afraid to go on that show and be asked the difficult questions, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, he said he could not call names because some of those people are still alive and among us today. That's what Kenneth Rijak said. And if you read his book, and I know there are persons in this gallery today that perhaps have read his book, he gave pseudonames, Madam Speaker. He didn't give the real names, other than some characters that would not have been involved in what he was doing, Madam Speaker. And he said one day when he was doing a transaction, he looked across and he saw a white man with a car rental taking pictures, and he knew the game was over. But this was after 10 years of bribing, taking care of public officials and politicians in Anguilla, Madam Speaker. Hundreds of millions of dollars laundered through Anguilla, used to bribe and prop up politicians and political figures, Madam Speaker. The same organization, Madam Speaker, that Cora, Richardson Hodge, and Cardigan Connor, and I'm not going to give Shelley a pass, Madam Speaker, because Shelley sat in the Anguilla Tourist Board while the Anguilla Tourist Board was used by the Anguilla United Front to bring in election materials and to use a company that was paid by the Anguilla Tourist Board to produce videos for the last election, Madam Speaker.
Please address the member appropriately.
Sorry, the member for Valley North, Madam Speaker, sorry. The member for Valley North. And she sat there quietly and said nothing, Madam Speaker. The member for Valley North, Ms. Shelia Rogers Webster, even after Tim Foy had made it clear that no contract should be signed beyond a particular date leading to the 2020 election, she had fixed her signature and endorsed it as a secondary signature to the chair of the tourist board at the time, giving contracts just before the elections, Madam Speaker. And then they want to say that they're the moral compass, Madam Speaker. How did that happen? Who got paid? Follow the money, Madam Speaker. Follow the trail. The list can go on, Madam Speaker, and on and on and on. So don't be fooled, Madam Speaker, because it was one Miss Cora Richardson Hodge and Cardigan Connor who sat in executive council and almost allowed the entire sovereignty of Anguilla to be diminished by allowing and facilitating and culturing a special purpose vehicle that former Minister Curtis Richardson said they were trying to make the baby bigger than the mother, Madam Speaker. An illegal vehicle, Madam Speaker, to do all sorts of things in Anguilla. And if it was not for the Mr. Tim Foy, Governor Tim Foy, former Governor Tim Foy, Madam Speaker, who had to use every bit of moral persuasion in the world, praying, reaching out to the FCDO, begging and pleading, because he did not want to be the one to suspend Anguilla's constitution and remove elected government from Anguilla, to shut it down, Madam Speaker. Man, they shut it down kicking and screaming, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I don't want to be too long today, but all I want to say is that I fully support this act. And no act is perfect. And there will always be amendments. We have come to this house many times to amend acts. But this is long overdue. And I know the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes would have been pleased and proud to see that this act is being passed today, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Single Island Wide Electoral District Member, Mr. Kenneth Hodge, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this motion, Madam Speaker. And please permit me, as the AG was making his presentation, Madam Speaker, I went to the UK's Department for Business and Trade, Madam Speaker, to get a deeper insight into this whole issue of bribery. And permit me, Madam Speaker, to share some of the information that is contained on that website, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, the advice that the Department for Business and Trade says, in regards to bribery and corruption, Madam Speaker, it says, doing business with integrity avoids risk and can help to build your company's reputation and its commercial success. Doing business with integrity, Madam Speaker. And then it defines corruption. Corruption is defined by Transparency International as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain, Madam Speaker. Examples of this: the abuse of the power given to an individual by another person or organization, activity that is beyond the position or remit of a person, or benefits obtained by an employee's personal gain rather than for their organization, Madam Speaker. Why I have taken time to highlight this, Madam Speaker? Because as a civil servant, Madam Speaker, civil servants often got a very bad name. It was felt that there were civil servants who could be bought or bribed, Madam Speaker. And also politicians, because when I entered the political arena, Madam Speaker, I was warned that, there are going to be those who will seek to grease your palms. There will be those who will offer you all kinds of incentives to get favors done, Madam Speaker. And I have experienced that on many occasions, Madam Speaker, as a civil servant, and now I'm in elected office. And there's a perception out there that people feel that they can come and offer you gifts and money. My colleague spoke about the brown paper bag. I know one lunchtime, Madam Speaker, I went home for lunch as a civil servant, and a car drove up in my yard, and this person brought out an envelope and gave me, says, "Thank you." And Madam Speaker, I recall going into the house and opening the envelope, and I saw it was $500 in it, Madam Speaker. And my wife can tell you, my fingers burnt. I never ate lunch so fast. I drove right back to that person's office, Madam Speaker. I gave it back. I said, "You don't need to give me $1 for doing the work I'm entrusted to do as a civil servant." You understand, Madam Speaker? Your integrity, your self-worth, Madam Speaker, is worth more than accepting. And don't be fooled, Madam Speaker. Those bribes are always accompanied at a later stage by requests for a favor. They lay the groundwork, Madam Speaker. They sweeten you. And when you think all is, as we say in Anguilla, hunky-dory, they come with their demands, and you can't refuse, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, shortly after coming to office, I recall I was at a business establishment, and I was invited upstairs, Madam Speaker, and this person came out with a big fat envelope to give me to say, "Thanks for all you've been doing." I said, "Thanks for what?" I said, "I'm simply doing the work, Madam Speaker, that the people of Anguilla entrusted to me on election day." Madam Speaker, I retreated so quickly I almost fell down the stairs, Madam Speaker. And I'm saying this publicly because over the years in Anguilla, there seems to be an aura, a stench, so to speak, that our elected representatives are taking bribes, they are susceptible to coercion. And Madam Speaker, this bribery act, I believe, is going to clear that stench away, because it's going to now bring people very accountable for their actions, Madam Speaker. And I sincerely hope that when persons break the law and they are found guilty, Madam Speaker, they go to jail, Madam Speaker. So I really commend this legislation. It is long in coming, but I think it is necessary now more than ever. And it will go a long way, Madam Speaker, in restoring a lot of integrity, a lot of the values, especially for our elected members, that members of the public will no longer be able to hang things over their heads and say they were bought, they were bribed, they were given incentives, Madam Speaker. So AG, I commend you for this legislation. I endorse it 150%, Madam Speaker, and I will follow with keen interest when it goes into being to follow what transpires thereafter. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Single Island Wide Electoral District Member, Mrs. Quincy Gums-Marie, is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sorry. Madam Speaker, we currently exist in an environment that encourages corruption and bribery. That is something that we have to contend with. That right now, as we speak, and until this bill is passed, we currently exist in an environment that encourages corruption and bribery. And what is left is the individual's own integrity to decide whether or not they will participate in or walk away from such acts. There is nothing else but the individual to make a choice. That is concerning. It is important to frame our reality in that way to understand the gravity and importance of today's bill before us. Because if we were to, as a House, reject this bill, we are encouraging the environment in which we currently exist. Right now, as you and I are speaking, as I am speaking to the people of Anguilla through you, an act of corruption or bribery can be occurring, and it is not technically an offense. It is not that we as Anguillians have invited corruption and bribery. It is just simply because the framework to discourage it and to respond to it when it does occur does not exist. And so to have this opportunity to speak to today's Bribery Act is a good step forward for Anguilla. Many times during election, people use 3 words that I try to stay away from, but they are real words that mean real things, but they are unfortunately the victims of overuse. Transparency, accountability, and good governance. We call for this. We decide where we put our votes because of this. It is important, even though sometimes we don't understand what that looks like and what that means, but we know that ultimately we expect transparency, accountability, good governance. We speak to half a House today, and while considering my words today, I reflected on the opposition we received when bringing forward the Procurement Act that was debated in this House by this Legislative Assembly. And that opposition has been mirrored again in the Bribery Act, where there are small things that possibly can be done or things that need to be explained that is being magnified as a reason why these acts should not be brought before the House. I recall, when being part of this administration, we do a lot of work, a lot of physical buildings, a lot of things that require procurement. I recall after the Procurement Act was passed, well, it wasn't passed, it was amended. The opening line says, bribery blight lives. Bribery blights lives. Its immediate victims include firms that lose out unfairly. The wider victims are government and society, undermined by a weakened rule of law and damaged social and economic system. At stake is the principle of free and fair competition, which stands diminished by each bribe offered or accepted. Tackling the scourge is a priority for anyone who cares about the future of business, the developing world, or international trade. The context on which the UK would have advanced bribery, the Bribery Act, is to ensure that there's an opportunity for fair competition, for businesses to have an opportunity to thrive in the existing market. And it is under that context as well that I endorse this act, but also in the realization that without this act, Anguilla continues to be vulnerable. My mind is also drawn to the many stories that we have heard in whispers on our porches and amongst our friends that we can't really confirm are true or not, but they exist, they are repeated so often that we wonder if there's some truth to it about officials, public officials. And what this does is create an environment of mutual accountability. If I, as a public official, accepts a bribe, I'll be held accountable. Sorry, Madam Speaker. I thought it was an audio issue that I was trying to respond to. If I, as a public official, accept a bribe, I'd be held responsible. But if a bribe is put forward to me, I also have a means of relying on the law for a remedy, for protection. And that is one of the things that I appreciate about this act, that the briber and the bribe are held accountable, but particularly the bribed have an opportunity to have law on their side to protect themselves. Because we must create an environment where it is unnatural, that it's rejected to approach anyone, business, government official, permanent secretary, anyone, with a recommendation or a suggestion that if they will create an environment for a certain outcome, that they will be the beneficiaries. It is important, Madam Speaker, to support this bill. It recognizes that while an institution, by its definition and intended function, may be perfect, that it is populated by persons who are imperfect, and susceptible to anything. And sometimes when you look into what happens that causes a person to accept a bribe, it is not this person's a bad person. They may be in a bad situation. They may have health issues. We see movies that are based on similar plot lines. But when you create an environment that rejects it, it gives that person an opportunity to rethink. Is it $10 that I may receive that may be necessary for my child suffering with cancer worth a lifetime in jail? Because it's not always that a person is greedy and they just want to accept. But now we are creating an opportunity, an environment that causes people to pause and rethink. I think of the vision statement of the Anguilla Progressive Movement, which vows to create a just and fair society. And by endorsing this Bribery Act, we are creating a just and fair society where individuals are held accountable for unethical practices and promote honesty and fair play within Anguilla. This is an act that we were encouraged to endorse by CFATF, and some of the recommendations that they have put forward we have had questions of whether or not those recommendations apply to the Anguillan context. What would be the results on the social fabric and the cultural practices? But this is one that went unopposed by the members of this administration. While we might have had a suggestion or two how to make it better, the intention was widely and wholly supported as it is today. And we look forward to, in a few minutes, being able to say that Anguilla and the environment in Anguilla does not support and allow for bribery, because the necessary recourse and systems for accountability, good governance, and transparency are in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Are there any other contributions to this bill? If there are no other contributions, I invite the mover to respond, please.
Madam Speaker, I am indeed grateful for the support of honorable members and their contributions and insight into the contents of this bill. Madam Speaker, I do believe that in a very thorough and comprehensive way, the measures outlined in this bill have been elaborated not just by myself in its introduction, but certainly in the commentary and contributions by my honorable colleagues. That being said, I wish to add nothing further and commend this to the House in the usual fashion.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Bribery Act 2023 be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a second time.
An act to make provisions about offenses relating to bribery and to establish the National Anti-Corruption and Bribery Committee and to make connected provisions.
Under Rule 45, the House of Assembly Rules of Procedures 2021, the bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole Assembly to be considered clause by clause. Assembly in committee.
Clauses 1 to 20.
I put the question that clauses 1 to 20 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 21.
Madam Chairperson, I propose that in relation to clause 21, the clause be amended in the following fashion. I think we have circulated the amendments proposed on the floor. That the bill for the Bribery Act 2023 be amended in clause 21 sub clause 3, as in relative to, subclause 3, 21 sub 3, by deleting paragraph G and substituting the following as its replacement, also G. 2 persons from the private sector appointed by the governor in council after consultation with the Chamber of Commerce. 2 persons from the private sector appointed by the governor in council after consultation with the Chamber of Commerce. That is the proposed amendment in relation to clause 21, subclause 3.
Thank you, Member. I put the question that clause 21 sub 3 be amended as circulated and do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clauses 22 to 25.
I put the question that clauses 22 through 25 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Schedules 1 and 2.
I put the question that Schedule 1 and 2 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title and the enacting clause.
I put the question that the title and the enacting clause do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The Assembly will now resume its sitting. The mover may report.
Madam Speaker, I beg to report that the bill shortly entitled A Bill for Bribery Act 2023 has passed through committee of this House with one amendment and is now ready for third reading.
The Bribery Act 2023. Third reading.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled A Bill for Bribery Act 2023 be read a third time and passed.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Bribery Act 2023 be now read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a third time.
An act to make provisions about offenses relating to bribery and to establish the National Anti-Corruption and Bribery Committee and to make connected provision.
Bill read a third time and passed.
A Bill for Counter-Terrorism Act 2023, second reading.
The member is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Counter-Terrorism Act 2023 be read a second time.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
I am grateful once more, Madam Speaker, for the kind indulgence to pilot this bill. Honorable members and colleagues would no doubt have noticed that this bill is quite a comprehensive measure. Again, this bill is proposed for passage as part of the CFATF and FATF compliance and relative to regulations and recommendations agreed interstate and bilaterally, multilaterally as well, between states, between and among states and territories who have committed to transparency, anti-corruption, anti-terrorism measures, and to strengthen the legislative framework in every jurisdiction so concerned. Having said that, Madam Speaker, I'm obliged to say that the objects and reasons for the bill can be stated thusly. The objects and reasons of the Bill for Counter-Terrorism Act 2023 is to make provisions for offenses related to terrorism and related matters. The bill has 13 parts, which I will synopsize in the following manner. Part 1 of this bill deals with the interpretation of terms used in the bill. including defining what is meant by terrorism, terrorist property, and privileged communication. Part 2 outlines the different offenses related to terrorism that are created under this part. The particular acts which are prohibited under this part, including the following. 1, persons are prohibited from making available financial and other related services with the intention that such services will be used for the purposes of terrorism. Similarly, persons are prohibited from making available property where there is reason to believe that the same property will be used for terrorism. Persons are also prohibited from using their property for the purposes of terrorism generally. Persons are prohibited from entering arrangements which facilitate the retention and acquisition of terrorist property by another person. 3, other offenses include prohibition against acquiring, concealing, or dealing with terrorist property, soliciting or giving support for the commission of terrorist acts or acts which can constitute terrorist acts objectively, harboring of persons committing terrorist acts, offering to provide explosives or lethal devices for the purpose of committing a terrorist act, recruiting persons for terrorist purposes, providing training to persons committing terrorism and money laundering. This part also provides that a person does not commit an offense under this act where he cooperates with the police, which acknowledges the difficulties in penetrating terrorist networks. And so this is one of the nimble aspects of the legislation, that one can escape criminal culpability and sanction by cooperation, which includes disclosing his suspicion of the commission of a terrorist act to a police officer or acting under the express consent instruction of a police officer. Part 3 deals with offenses created under conventions dealing with combating terrorism. Those are international treaty arrangements. These offenses include the following. It is an offense to engage in any activity which endangers the safety of maritime navigation, which includes destroying navigational facilities, seizing control over a ship by force, or performing an act of violence against a person on board a ship. So in other words, acts of piracy are acts of terrorism. It also prohibits the delivering, discharging, etc. of an explosive in a public place. A person who places any substance in a place or sends a substance to a particular place with the intention of inducing a person to believe that the substance placed is noxious or is a lethal device or chemical weapon commits an offense. So, foolish pranking or menacing persons in the public by deadly threats, even if intendedly operated for joke purposes or to fool around, to monkey around, once it puts any portion of the mass public or the community in fear, is an act of terrorism. Similarly, an offense is committed where a person communicated information which he knows is false with the intention of inducing a person to believe that there is a noxious substance. Similarly, pranking on serious business, scaring people unnecessarily in relation to their lives and public safety. Acts. Terrorism. Lethal device or weapon of mass destruction present in a particular place. And lastly, a person also commits an offense if he unlawfully uses, threatens, etc., to use chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons against a person or property in Anguilla. That's a bit of a stretch, but this is the standard extracted from the commitments by international conventions regarding chemical and biological warfare. Why I say it's a bit of a stretch, because the probability of such a thing happening might be negligible, but that is the commitment to the international community to harmonize our approaches to the eventuality, however minimal or appreciable it may be, that these acts can occur. Better to have it than to want it. Part 4 deals with the interim and final designation as terrorist and or terror-associated entity. This part provides that the governor may make an interim designation of an entity as a terrorist entity if the UN Security Council has advised that measures should be taken in relation to an entity because the risk or risks of terrorism or terrorist acts being carried out by that entity. So that entity does not necessarily mean religious. So people should not be jumping around thinking that there is something sinister in this provision to target anybody for their religion or anything of the sort. This is an objective standard. An entity which may be a threat to the security of the community does not necessarily be religious. It may be an ordinary criminal organization whose activities may broadly have that effect on the community and therefore would come within the orbit of a provision or the provisions of this part of the bill. Similarly, the governor may, after consultation with the Secretary of State, certainly that would be a relevant Secretary of State, make a final designation of an entity if he believes that the entity is involved in a terrorist act or is owned or controlled by someone involved in a terrorist act. This part provides for the notification of these designations to the entity and the public by publication in the Gazette. Part 5 deals with the material on which designations may be based. This part provides that the governor, in determining whether or not to make or revoke a designation, may take into account any relevant information, including classified security information. This part also defines quote-unquote classified security information, and information held by a specified agency that must be treated as confidential for specified reasons. This part also makes provision for the judicial review of designations by the governor and revocation and renewal by the governor of designations made by him or her. Where a designation is revoked, renewed, or expires or is invalid, the governor is required under this part to notify the public and specified persons, including the designated entity of the same. Part 6 deals with the provisions in relation to designated entities, whether such designation is a UN Security Council designation or designation by the governor. This part outlines the duty of the unit in relation to entities or individual, or it should be individuals, or an individual that is designated as a terrorist entity by the Security Council of the United Nations. Such duties including maintaining a list of designated entities and circulating a list of procedures that financial institutions and service providers must apply in relation to designated entities. Where a designated entity has funds with a financial institution or service provider, the institution or service provider shall immediately inform the unit of the same. The financial institution or service provider is also required to immediately freeze funds owned or controlled by a designated entity. Where the unit is in receipt of any information under this section, the unit shall furnish this information to the Attorney General immediately. The Attorney General may also apply to a judge for an order declaring an individual or entity to be a listed entity and for the funds of such listed entity to be frozen. Naturally, in relation to terrorist activity where there is evidence or some evidence tending to show that activity is being carried on, has been carried on, or likely to be in train. Part 7 deals with sanctions under the Sanctions and Money Laundering Act 2018. Part 8 deals with the travel ban and arms embargo. So these are references to UK legislation that are in existence and which, through measures usually instituted by way of orders in council, reach the shores and the domestic legal structures of the overseas territories. This will provide an almost seamless arrangement for the updating and accommodating of the sanctions as they flow from time to time for ready incorporation into the domestic law of this territory without having to wait, in other words, for the staggered effect of an order in council. Part 9 deals with the investigation of offenses and gives a senior police officer varying powers to assist with the investigation of such offenses. A senior officer may apply for a detention order to detain a person where such officer believes that such detention is necessary to prevent the commission of an offense or the interference of an investigation of an offense. Now, one must significantly recognize that, and I dare say pay particular attention to the fact that these measures, as outlined in this enactment, is more constitutionally compliant, certainly, with some of the measures that the UK themselves instituted in the mid to late 2000s under their legislation, which, as some of colleagues would know, ended up in the upper tribunals and courts of the United Kingdom, and many of those measures were struck down because of the overbroad and high-handed nature of them. This does not detail any such thing. In fact, it says here that in relation to interfering with the liberty of anybody under suspicions or the faintest of evidence, one must approach the court, and there's no direct police apprehension of anyone here. That must be noted. The senior officer may also apply for an order to gather information from a specified person where the court is satisfied that an offense has been committed and the information being sought relates to the offense or the whereabouts of the person suspected of committing the offense. This part also provides that the officer may apply to the court for an order to search property in connection with the offense under this bill. Part 10 deals with the duties imposed on regulatory authorities. Very important. Regulated businesses and the public service to disclose in accordance with this part information that comes into its possession in relation to an offense under this bill. The obligation to disclose, however, does not extend to information that is subject to legal privilege. That legal privilege attaches to certain kinds of communication, attorney-client, between a lawyer and his client, and certain security intelligence information passing between relevant authorities, usually are impressed with that privilege or confidentiality against open or ready disclosure. Part 11 deals with information sharing to a foreign state. Part 12 with the seizure and confiscation of terrorist property. This part provides that where a senior customs officer, immigration officer, or police officer believes that a person is in possession of terrorist property, such officer may apply to a judge for a restraint order in respect of that property. This part also allows for the application of the confiscation of property or money on conviction of an offense under this bill. Attorney General may also apply to a judge for an order to search a building, place, or vessel and to seize property found in such building, place, or vessel that he reasonably believes may be confiscated under an order for confiscation. A restraint order may also be given to prevent the dealing or disposing of any interest in property seized under this part. Under this part, a senior immigration, customs, or police officer may also make an application for an order to seize and detain cash where there is reasonable ground to believe that such cash is terrorist property or is intended to be used in the commission of a terrorist offense. Part 13 deals with miscellaneous matters, including the power given to the governor to make regulations under this act. That having been said, Madam Speaker, honorable members, those matters just outlined are in essence the object and reasons of the bill. A short insight into the text and purpose of the measures outlined in the bill were those just communicated. Having said that, Madam Speaker, I commend this bill for the consideration of the whole House.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now invite debate on the merits and principles of this bill, a bill for Counterterrorism Act 2023. Floor is open. If there are no contributions, I invite the mover to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think this is a record in relation to such a comprehensive bill. Nonetheless, I am grateful to colleagues for their ready consent and support to this measure or these measures outlined in the bill. With that, Madam Speaker, I wish to say no more than that I am very happy with the support and I commend this for passage.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Counterterrorism Act 2023 be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a second time.
An act to make provisions for offenses related to terrorism, including financing for and the financing and support of terrorist activities, running terrorist training activities, and encouraging terrorism, and to make connected provision.
Under Rule 45 of the House of Assembly Rules of Procedure 2021, the bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole Assembly to be considered clause by clause. Assembly in committee.
Clauses 1 through to 56.
I put the question that clauses 1 through 56 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 57.
Madam Chair, in relation to clause 57, it is proposed that the bill be amended to introduce the following amendment. That is to say, that the bill for the Counter-Terrorism Act 2023 be amended in relation to clause 57 in the following manner. A, in clauses 57.1, subclause 1 and 2, by deleting the phrase, quote, as soon as reasonably practicable, end quote, whenever it occurs, and substituting it with the following phrase, quote unquote, without delay, without delay.
I put the question that clauses 57 sub 1 and 2 be amended as circulated and do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clauses 58 to 68.
I put the question that clauses 58 through 68 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 69.
Again, Madam Chair, with your kind indulgence, it is proposed that the clause of this bill in clause 69 be amended in the following way: that the bill for the Counterterrorism Act 2023 be amended, be in clause 69, subclause 3, by deleting the term Commissioner of Police, and substituting it with the new phrase, replacement phrase, Senior Police Officer, clause 69.3.
I put the question that clauses 69.3 be amended as circulated and do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clauses 70 to 99.
I put the question that clauses 70 to 99 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 100.
Madam Chair, in relation to this clause, with your kind indulgence, I wish to propose that the bill for the Counterterrorism Act 2023 be amended in clause 100 by amending subclause 2, deleting the word court and substituting it with the phrase an interest-bearing account. An interest-bearing account. Clause 100, subclause 2.
I put the question that clause 100, subclause 2 be amended as circulated and do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clauses 100 to 105.
I put the question that clauses 100 to 105 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Schedules 1 and 2.
I put the question that Schedule 1 and 2 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Schedule 3.
Madam Chair, in relation to Schedule 3 of the bill and Annex 2, it is proposed that the bill for the Counterterrorism Act 2023 be amended in relation to Schedule 3, Annex 2, by deleting the acronym EU, meaning European Union, where it occurs, and substituting it with UN, United Nations.
I put the question that Schedule 3, Annex 2 be amended as circulated and do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title and the enacting clause.
I put the question that the title and the enacting clause do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The Assembly will now resume its sitting. The mover may report.
Madam Speaker, I beg to report that the bill shortly entitled Counter-Terrorism Act 2023 has been passed through committee with some amendments and is ready for its third reading.
The Counter-Terrorism Act 2023, third reading.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled A Bill for Counter-Terrorism Act 2023 be read a third time and passed.
Madam Speaker, I rise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Counter-Terrorism Act 2023 be now read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a third time.
An act to make provisions for offenses related to terrorism, including financing for and the financing and support of terrorist activities, running terrorist training activities, and encouraging terrorism, and to make connected provision.
Bill read a third time and passed.
A bill for Proliferation Financing Prohibition Act 2023, second reading.
Members recognized.
Madam Speaker, can I ask that this bill be deferred lower down on the list so that we could take the other bill? I need a copy of it. The one just after, and then I'll come back to this one. Okay, well, yeah, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we have 5 first read. Well, let's just dispose of it then, yeah, because it's a short amendment. Madam Speaker, I beg your pardon. I somehow took this measure for another measure which is for first reading. So, Madam Speaker, you're quite correct. Nonetheless, I think we can press on. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled A Bill for Proliferation Financing Prohibition Act 2023 be read a second time.
Madam Speaker, I second.
Many thanks once again, Madam Speaker. This is a comprehensive measure in relation to proliferation financing, and it is a companion legislative measure to the one just read and passed relative to counterterrorism. So this can be shortly taken by this Honorable House. To this end, therefore, I am obliged to say that the objects and reasons of the Bill for Proliferation Financing Prohibition Act 2023 is to make provisions for offenses related to proliferation financing and related matters. The bill has 8 parts, shorter than the last. Part 1 makes preliminary provisions for the interpretation of terms used in the Act and details the application of this Act. Part 2 details the meaning of proliferation financing and creates the offense of proliferation financing in relation to the matters dealt with under the Act as they touch and concern the law just earlier passed, that is the Counter-Terrorism Act. Part 3 deals with financial sanctions that may be imposed on a person or entity designated as such by a resolution of the United Nations Security Council or by the governor by publication in the Gazette. This part also provides for the time period during which such designation shall be in effect and includes provisions for the extension, the revocation, and the judicial review of such designation. Where a designation is made under this part, or if same has been extended or revoked, the governor shall notify persons specified in this part, including the person or entity who has been designated as a designated person or entity under this law. This part also provides prohibits individuals from dealing with assets owned by a designated person or entity or making assets available to a designated person or entity. Lastly, it allows for the seizure of frozen assets belonging to a designated person or entity and for the management of such assets in accordance with the procedure established in the Proceeds of Crime Act. Part 4 makes provisions for financial measures that may be imposed to deal with proliferation financing. This part prohibits a number of activities, including 1, making available of assets of financial services to designated person or entity where such financing will be used to facilitate the production of and training in the use of control items and similar activities. 2, prohibiting persons from entering joint ventures with designated persons or entity. 3, prohibiting financial institutions or service providers from entering into business relations with other financial institutions or service providers established in designated countries. 4, prohibiting designated countries, financial institutions, or service providers from establishing offices or accounts in Anguilla. 5, prohibiting persons from dealing with a designated country, flagged vessel, or ensuring a flagged vessel of a designated country. Part 5. This part creates reporting obligations, and this is a common feature of the legislation or the pieces of legislation piloted this morning in relation to the CFATF recommendations and requirements. Reporting. Similarly, a person who suspects that they are in possession of assets belonging to a designated person or entity shall report the suspicion. This part also creates an obligation on financial institutions and service providers to report to the unit any suspicious transaction that they believe may be relevant to an offense under this Act, the Proceeds of Crime Act, or a counter-terrorism resolution. Similarly, a financial institution or service provider shall engage in enhanced reporting to the unit in particular circumstances, including where an account was opened by a designated country, person, or entity. Where a report is made under this part, the fact that such report was made shall not be disclosed. Honourable members, Part 6. This part deals with the supervisory functions of the unit and the powers held by the unit for the enforcement of the provisions of the bill. Such powers include the power to require a person or entity to provide specified information or document in accordance with a notice given by the unit. The unit also has the power to enter and inspect premises used for business activities. Where documents specified in the notice are discovered on inspection, the unit has the power to remove such documents in the performance of its functions under this part of the Act. Similarly, the unit can conduct an on-site inspection of business premises to ensure compliance. The powers under this part, however, are not exercisable in relation to privileged information or documents. Another commonly recurring theme, protection of attorney-client privilege and information communicated in circumstances and under conditions of utmost confidentiality and privacy. This part also details the ramification for failure to comply with the entity, where the entity is a body corporate partnership or limited partnership or unincorporated body. Any information obtained by the unit shall be held confidential and may also be disclosed for specified purposes. This part also makes provision for the issuing of warnings and imposition of civil penalties for failure to comply with the prohibitions in this bill. Before a penalty can be imposed, notice must be given of such penalty. Person aggrieved by a penalty imposed by the unit may appeal to the High Court. Part 7. This part deals with authorization where a person or entity has been designated as a designated person or entity by the United Nations Security Council or the governor. Such person or entity may apply to the governor requesting authorization for access to money or financing for specified purposes, including for basic living expenses for such person and or his or her family. Where authorization is granted under this part, conditions may be attached by the governor. The authorization may be revoked or varied, and the notice of same shall be given to the person affected by the revocation or variation. And finally, Part 8 of the bill. This part provides for and deals with the miscellaneous provisions in the bill, includes the requirements of the governor to publish a list of designated persons at least twice a year in the Gazette. The governor is also required to identify persons they believe meet the criteria for designation by the United Nations Security Council. That should be Security Council. This part also allows for the unfreezing of assets where the governor is satisfied that the asset is not connected to a designated person to proliferation financing purposes. The governor is also required to prepare a report regarding the exercise of powers of the governor and the unit, and the same shall be laid before the House of Assembly. Transparency, accountability, good governance. Similarly, the governor is required to report to the United Nations Council United Nations Council on the implementation, beg your pardon, in Anguilla of any, should not just be a, but any relevant United Nations Council resolution. This part also provides for the delegation by the governor to the agency the exercise of his or her powers and functions under the Act. Neither the governor nor agency nor other official of the government shall be liable for any criminal or civil action for anything done in good faith in the performance of their functions under this law, this enactment. This part also allows for the amendment of the schedule by order made by the governor. Madam Speaker, these are the briefest indications of the contents of the bill and the measures they propose, which I am able to express to this Honorable House. That having been said, I commend it for passage and full consideration.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now invite debate on the merits and principles of this bill, a bill for Proliferation Financing Prohibition Act 2023. Floor is open for contributions. The Single Island-wide Electoral District Member, Mrs. Quincy Gums-Marie, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I stand briefly to commend the Attorney General's chambers for the work that they would have done throughout this process. You can see that it's a lot of bills that have been brought forward, some inviting debate, others not so much. Widely speaking, Madam Speaker, these bills are in relation to Anguilla standing on the international front. And while some people may listen to the title and hear the objects and reasons as put forward by the Attorney General, may feel as though the issues being brought forward may be foreign to Anguilla, things like terrorism and terrorist financing. But like I said earlier, similar to the Bribery Act, if we don't have protection, then we are creating an environment for these things to occur. So while they may seem as though there may be pieces of legislation that may not be on the minds of the average citizen, they may not be important to the average person. In terms of Anguilla standing internationally as it relates to being a country that rejects these sort of advances, whether it is bribery, a place where terrorist financing can be funneled through, a place where illicit financing for other reasons can be channeled through. We are sending a message that this is not something that is accepted in Anguilla, and also gives us an opportunity to be recognized by wider agents such as the EU and other financial authorities that rate us as a country, that we are doing the work to be off the blacklist, to be compliant with the requirements and meet the international standards. So it has been a lot. It has redirected the Attorney General's Chamber's efforts into ensuring that we get this done and get it done on time, so that when Anguilla is reviewed, we have been shown to meet the recommendations coming out of the previous reviews and have a fighting chance at having our international standing be reviewed in a positive light. So I definitely support these bills and the upcoming first readings for the purpose of positioning Anguilla to be able to have an opportunity in the financial services industry, in the financial market area.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Are there any other contributions? If there are no other contributions, I invite the mover to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank honorable members and colleagues for their swift approbation of the measures contained in the bill. I know that my colleagues are always keen to advance the most favorable and positive image of the country. And so, as the honorable member indicated, these measures are necessary for complying with international obligations which are incumbent on Anguilla as part of the CFATF arrangements. And if only for the hour of the day, I would have otherwise thought that the swift approbation was because of the luncheon period, but I know it is not that. It is clearly not that. Once again, thank you, Madam Speaker and honorable colleagues, for your contributions and support of this measure. Madam Speaker, I don't wish to press your indulgence to extinction. I think the contents of the bill and the measures that propose to be taken under this enactment have been pretty clearly set out, and I do have the support of colleagues, and so with that I wish to commend this entire enactment for passage. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled Proliferation Financing Prohibition Act 2023 be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a second time.
An act to make provision for the prevention of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and ensure the implementation of financial measures relating to counter-proliferation resolutions of the United Kingdom and to provide for other matters connected therewith.
Under Rule 45 of the House of Assembly Rules of Procedure 2021, the bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole Assembly to be considered clause by clause. Assembly in committee.
Clauses 1 through to 45.
I put the question that clauses 1 through 45 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clauses 46 to 71.
I put the question that clauses 46 through 71 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Schedules 1 and 2.
I put the question that Schedule 1 and 2 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Schedule 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With your indulgence, it is proposed that the Bill for Proliferation Financing Prohibition Act 2023 be amended in Schedule 3, Annex 2 by deleting the acronym EU, European Union, wherever it occurs, and substituting it with UN, United Nations.
I put the question that Schedule 3, Annex 2 be amended as circulated and do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Schedules 4 to 6.
I put the question that Schedule 4 to 6 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those
Aye.
against say no. The ayes have it.
The title and the enacting clause.
I put the question that the title and the enacting clause do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it. The Assembly will now resume its sitting. You may report. Move on.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to report that the bill shortly entitled "A Bill for Proliferation Financing Prohibition Act 2023 has passed through committee with one amendment and is now ready for its third reading.
A Bill for Proliferation Financing Prohibition Act 2023, third reading.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled "A Bill for Proliferation Financing Prohibition Act 2023 be read a third time and passed.
Madam Speaker, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled "A Bill for Proliferation Financing Prohibition Act 2023 be now read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a third time.
An act to make provision for the prevention of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and ensure the implementation of financial measures relating to counter-proliferation resolutions of the United Nations and to provide for the other matters connected therewith.
Bill read a third time and passed.
A Bill for Financial Services Commission Amendment Act 2023, first reading.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill shortly entitled "A Bill for Financial Services Commission Amendment Act 2023 be read the first time.
Madam Speaker, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled "A Bill for Financial Services Commission Amendment Act 2023 be read a first time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a first time.
An act to amend the Financial Services Commission Act, RSAC F28, to make provision in relation to any disclosure of information to the supervisory authority.
Bill read a first time.
A Bill for Trust Amendment Act 2023, first reading.
Madam Speaker, stand in my place to beg to move that the bill shortly entitled "A Bill for Trust or Trusts Amendment Act 2023 be read the first time.
Madam Speaker, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Trusts Amendment Act 2023 be read a first time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a first time.
An act to amend the Trust Act, RSA, Chapter T70, to require trustees to keep records of beneficial owners of the trust.
Bill read a first time.
A bill for proceeds of crime amendment number 2 Act 2023, first reading.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill for the Proceeds of Crime Amendment Number 2 Act 2023 be read the first time.
Madam Speaker, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Proceeds of Crime Amendment Number 2, Act 2023 be read a first time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a first time.
An act to amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, RSA, Chapter P98.
Bill read a first time.
A bill for Financial Intelligence Unit Amendment Act 2023, first reading.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill for the Financial Intelligence Unit Amendment Act 2023 be read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Financial Intelligence Unit Amendment Act 2023 be read a first time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a first time.
An act to amend the Financial Intelligence Unit Act 2020.
Bill read a first time.
A bill for Digital Assets Business Act 2023, first reading.
Madam Speaker, once again and for the final time, I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled A Bill for Digital Assets Business Act 2023 be read the first time.
Madam Speaker, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Digital Assets Business Act 2023 be read a first time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a first time.
An act to provide for the licensing and regulation of persons carrying on digital asset business, the supervision of digital asset business, and connected matters.
Bill read a first time.
Private members' bills, none. Private bills, none. Other orders of the day.
The single island-wide electoral district member, Mr. Kenneth Hodge, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I won't be very long. I just wanted to extend my condolences to the family of the late Julian David Lake, He was a member of my community, Madam Speaker. Big J, as they call him. He's going to be buried in St. Martin next Thursday. And Madam Speaker, this was a man with a very dry sense of humor, always had a smile on his face, Madam Speaker. And he always had encouraging words. He always would get to the point. He always was not afraid to tackle the issues. And I look forward to our many conversations, Madam Speaker, particularly when he would hang out in the Farrington there by the Chinese. And Madam Speaker, he will be missed. He was an indelible part of the Farrington community. Even though he lived for many years in St. Martin, Madam Speaker, he still had his home in the Farrington, Anguilla. And Madam Speaker, the Farrington community will surely miss him. I believe that quite a few persons from the community will be joining to St. Martin next Thursday for the funeral, and I hope to be among those going over there. And in a previous session of the House, Madam Speaker, we would have given our condolences to the family of young Garmon. I know he's been laid to rest this weekend, and again, Madam Speaker, from my seat, from my family's seat, to his family, his friends, and his parents, and our honorable colleague here in this House as well, my condolences once more. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Are there any other orders of the day? The Honorable Member for Road South is recognized.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would also like to join the Honorable Single-Letter Member in extending condolences to a number of persons who have passed in the community. A good schoolmate of mine, Voslin, who passed in the Virgin Islands, Madam Speaker, I would like to extend, via this medium, my deepest condolences to her family, to Keith Tampa Gomes, and the rest of the family on her untimely passing, Madam Speaker. I would also like to extend my deepest condolences to the family of Blue K. Romney, a very integral part of the Blowing Point community, a trailblazer, an entrepreneur, one of our ferry boat operators, and we always had great conversation. I can recall the last time we came over from St. Martin, his son and him, they invited me up to the Captain's Gallows, if I recall it that, just to have a view of the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal from that viewpoint. And he had some ideas, Madam Speaker, for that. And I always appreciate his calm demeanor. And I would like to wish his family deepest condolences. His daughter, who's a member of the Anguilla Public Service, Roxy, Bubbles, Blondale, Richardson, and all of the family, my deepest condolences, Madam Speaker. I would also like to extend, well, he's a cousin of mine, but extend to the family a Rashati. You know, he was also an Adventist, Madam Speaker. On his passing, I was really surprised. I was not on island when these persons passed, so I've already reached out to the families personally, but through this medium, I would like to extend condolences. You know, Shati was a chef. He was a guy who had always had a jovial spirit. We call him Shati because he was shot. But I know he will be missed. And again, Madam Speaker, via this medium, I'd like to extend deepest condolences to the family of Miss Aveline, Mom, Sister Davis of Blowing Point. Everyone knows Sister. You know, she would always pull her chair up whenever we'd have rallies and what have you. And her children and her grandchildren continue to make an impact, not only in the community, but across the island. So thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for affording me the opportunity to extend my deepest condolences to those families. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Are there any other orders of the day? The member for Valley South is recognized.
Madam Speaker, of course, I must join in offering condolences to the family of Mr. Lake. And to all of those who are suffering with the loss of loved ones right now. It does feel as though we are dealing with a lot of mourning, and there are a lot of people who are grieving and who are deeply hurt. And I think in this time that we should take as much of our time to be there for persons and support them through these periods. as best as possible, because everybody grieves very differently, Madam Speaker. And I would hope that in whatever form that grief manifests, that there are persons around those who are grieving who would be willing to give them the support they need.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Any others? And on behalf of myself and my family and the staff of the House, we too offer condolences. I would actually like to ask leave of the House to have a moment's silence in honor of Captain Bluekeem, because he was a man dedicated to service, and you can call upon him anytime to do anything for you, whether it was to take a package, take a message, anything. So I would like to ask leave of the Assembly to grant one moment's silence in his honor. Can we please stand? That moment starts now. May his soul rest in peace, and may his memory be a blessing. Thank you, members.
Adjournment.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House adjourn sine die.
Madam Speaker, I rise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that this honorable House stands adjourned sine die. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. This honorable House now stands adjourned sine die. Thank you, members. Have a good day.